Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States.
The date is March 15th, 2025, and a convoy of armored vehicles is moving through the mountains of northern Iran. Inside, one of them sits Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the country's top nuclear scientist. He doesn't know that Israeli intelligence has been tracking his movements for over 2 years. Iran's nuclear program has been a flashpoint in Middle Eastern geopolitics for decades. At its center stood figures like Fakhrizadeh, architects of a program that Western powers viewed as an existential threat.
That Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has been killed in today's joint attack by the US and Israel.
His elimination wasn't just an assassination. It was the culmination of one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations in modern history. To understand how this happened, we need to go back further than you might expect. Iran's nuclear ambitions began long before the Islamic Republic even existed. In the 1950s, under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Iran launched its nuclear program with full American support. The Atoms for Peace initiative provided Iran with its first research reactor. Back then, nobody worried about Iranian nukes because the Shah was a Western ally. Everything changed in 1979. The Iranian Revolution toppled the Shah and installed Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini as supreme leader. The new Islamic Republic immediately positioned itself as an adversary to both the United States and Israel. What had been a peaceful nuclear program under Western oversight became something entirely different. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, Iran quietly expanded its nuclear capabilities. They built facilities. They trained scientists. They acquired technology through legitimate channels and shadowy ones. Western intelligence agencies suspected something was happening, but concrete evidence remained elusive. Then came 2002. An Iranian opposition group revealed the existence of 2 secret nuclear facilities, a uranium enrichment plant at Natanz and a heavy water facility at Arak. Suddenly, the world had proof. Iran wasn't just pursuing civilian nuclear energy. They were building the infrastructure necessary for weapons. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh emerged during this period as the leading figure in Iran's nuclear program. He headed the AMAD project, which Israeli intelligence identified as Iran's organized effort to develop nuclear weapons. When international pressure forced Iran to officially disband AMAD in 2003, Fakhrizadeh didn't disappear. He simply reorganized the same work under different names, different departments, scattered across multiple facilities. The CIA and Mossad built extensive dossiers on him. They mapped his routines, his security details, his family connections. They knew he lived in a heavily guarded compound in northeastern Tehran. They knew he traveled with armed escorts. They knew he rarely appeared in public. What they needed was an opportunity. Israel had already demonstrated its willingness to act against nuclear threats. In 1981, Israeli jets destroyed Iraq's Osirak reactor before it could become operational. In 2007, they bombed a suspected Syrian nuclear facility. Direct strikes worked when facilities were isolated and vulnerable. Iran presented a different challenge entirely. Its nuclear program wasn't concentrated in one location. It was distributed across dozens of sites, many of them underground, some built inside mountains. A conventional military strike couldn't eliminate the program. It would only set it back temporarily while guaranteeing massive retaliation. So Israel pursued a parallel strategy: eliminate the people who made the program possible. Between 2010 and 2012, 4 Iranian nuclear scientists were assassinated. Masoud Ali Mohammadi was killed by a motorcycle bomb. Majid Shahriari died when his car was attacked. Dariush Rezainejad was shot outside his home. Each operation bore the hallmarks of sophisticated intelligence work, but Israel never officially claimed responsibility. Fakhrizadeh survived this period. His security was too tight, his movements too unpredictable. He learned from each assassination, adjusting his patterns, varying his routes. For years, he seemed untouchable. Meanwhile, Iran continued advancing its nuclear capabilities. By 2015, They'd accumulated enough enriched uranium to potentially build several nuclear weapons if they chose to enrich it further. International pressure led to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal that the Obama administration championed. Iran agreed to strict limitations on its program in exchange for sanctions relief. Then, Trump pulled out of the deal in 2018. Sanctions snapped back. Iran's economy spiraled, and Tehran responded by gradually violating the agreement's restrictions. They installed more advanced centrifuges. They enriched uranium to higher levels. They blocked some international inspections. Fakhrizadeh's role became more crucial than ever. He wasn't just maintaining the program, he was accelerating it, pushing capabilities forward while the diplomatic framework collapsed around him. Israeli intelligence intensified their surveillance. They needed more than just his location. They needed to understand his security protocols at a granular level. How many guards? What weapons? What vehicles? What communication systems? How did those systems change based on threat levels? They recruited sources. They intercepted communications. They used satellites and drones. Slowly, methodically, they built a complete picture of how Fakhrizadeh moved through the world. And then they started planning something unprecedented. Not a bombing, not a shooting. Something that would demonstrate Israel's technological superiority while sending an unmistakable message to Iran's nuclear program. The operation was years in development. What happened on that mountain road would change everything. November 27th, 2020. A Friday afternoon on Imam Khomeini Boulevard, northeast of Tehran, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was traveling with his wife in a bulletproof Nissan Teana. Standard protocol for a man who'd survived decades as a target. The convoy approached the town of Absard, a rural area where the road narrowed. Intelligence suggested Fakhrizadeh sometimes visited a property there. His security team had swept the route earlier. Nothing unusual was detected. What happened next took approximately 90 seconds. Gunfire erupted. The initial reports were confusing, contradictory. Some witnesses claimed 13 attackers ambushed the convoy. Others said it was a suicide bombing. Iranian media initially reported both versions simultaneously, but as investigators examined the scene, they found something that didn't match either narrative. No bodies, no shell casings scattered in the pattern a firefight would create, no evidence of suicide bombers. What they found instead was a Nissan pickup truck, destroyed, with a mounted machine gun still partially intact in the debris. The weapon was connected to a sophisticated camera system and what appeared to be satellite communication equipment. The operation hadn't used human attackers at all. Israel had deployed a remote-controlled AI-assisted weapons system. The machine gun was reportedly controlled via satellite from a location hundreds of miles away. Cameras used facial recognition technology to identify Fakhrizadeh specifically. The system was designed to fire only when it had a clear shot at the target, minimizing the risk to his wife and others nearby. Fakhrizadeh was hit multiple times. His bodyguards rushed him to a hospital, but he died from his injuries. His wife, sitting inches away during the attack, was physically unharmed. The sophistication stunned intelligence communities worldwide. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a demonstration of capability that crossed into territory most nations hadn't publicly approached. Autonomous weapons had been discussed, theorized, feared. Israel had apparently deployed one in an actual operation. Iran's response was immediate but measured. Supreme Leader Khamenei vowed retaliation. Parliament passed legislation mandating an increase in uranium enrichment to 20%, a significant step closer to weapons-grade material. But the military response many expected didn't materialize immediately. Why? Because the operation exposed uncomfortable realities about Iran's vulnerabilities. If Israel could place a sophisticated weapons system on Iranian soil, activate it remotely, and execute a precision strike on one of their most protected officials, what else could they do? The psychological impact arguably exceeded the tactical one. Fakhrizadeh's death didn't end Iran's nuclear program. Programs don't collapse because one person dies, no matter how crucial. Other scientists continued the work, but it sent shockwaves through the entire structure. If the architect of the program wasn't safe despite maximum security, who was? The timing mattered too. This happened weeks before Biden's inauguration. Trump's administration had pursued maximum pressure. Biden had indicated interest in returning to diplomacy, potentially rejoining the nuclear deal. By killing Fakhrizadeh, Israel complicated that path significantly. Iran's hardliners could argue that negotiation was futile, that only strength mattered. The assassination fed directly into their narrative. It also set a precedent that made other nations deeply uncomfortable. If remote-controlled weapon systems could be deployed for state-sanctioned killings, what barriers remained? The technology wasn't uniquely Israeli. Other countries possessed similar capabilities. The question wasn't whether such operations were possible, it was whether they were acceptable, and Israel had answered that question through action rather than debate. In the years following Fakhrizadeh's death, Iran continued advancing its nuclear capabilities despite his absence. They enriched uranium to 60% purity, the highest levels ever. They installed advanced centrifuges at fortified underground facilities. They restricted international inspections further. Whether Fakhrizadeh's assassination slowed the program or accelerated Iran's determination to push forward remains genuinely unclear. What became clear was that the shadow war between Israel and Iran had entered a new technological phase. Cyber attacks like Stuxnet, assassinations using remote weapons, sabotage operations inside secure facilities. Each action raised the stakes while staying just below the threshold of open warfare. The mountain road where Fakhrizadeh died is ordinary now. Traffic passes through daily. There's no memorial, no marker of what happened there. But the operation itself marks something significant. Not just the death of one scientist, but the demonstration that certain technological boundaries had been crossed. The weapon that killed him represented capabilities that most people assumed existed only in theory or distant future. Iran rebuilt after Fakhrizadeh. They always do, but they rebuilt, knowing that even their most protected figures, in their most secure moments, remained within reach of an adversary willing to deploy tools that redefined what assassination could look like in the modern age. The elimination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh didn't resolve the fundamental tensions driving this conflict. Iran's nuclear program continues. Israel's willingness to act preemptively hasn't changed. The technology used that day on a mountain road outside Tehran just made explicit what intelligence agencies already knew. The nature of covert operations had fundamentally shifted. What makes this case particularly significant isn't just what happened, but what it represents about where things are headed. Remote weapon systems, AI-assisted targeting, operations conducted from hundreds of miles away with surgical precision. These aren't theoretical capabilities anymore. They're tools that have been deployed, tested, and proven effective in actual operations. The question isn't whether other nations will develop similar systems. Many already have. It's whether the international community will establish any meaningful boundaries around their use, or whether we've simply entered an era where these operations become normalized elements of statecraft. Fakhrizadeh's death changed calculations on all sides. It demonstrated reach, it exposed vulnerabilities, and it proved that certain thresholds everyone assumed would hold had already been crossed. The shadow war between Israel and Iran didn't end on that road. It just revealed how much the rules had already changed without most people noticing.